So here we are at the default Barton Aerodrome in Microsoft Flight Simulator, looking at the big Radials Curtiss P40B, aka the Tomahawk 2, when it was in RAF service. This is the first release from new development company Big Radials, and we can expect big things from Big Radials if this is anything to go by. So first, a little bit about that new company, because obviously they're new, so you may not have heard of them. There are two people mainly behind it. If you go on the AvSim forum, as I do quite often, you've probably come across a guy that goes by the handle of Leprechaun Live. He's the main modeler of this thing and the texture of this thing, and as you can see from this thing, he's pretty good at it. The guy that he's teamed up with it, if you go on Flight Sim developer forums, you might have come across a guy that goes by the handle of Ozwookie. He's the guy behind the sort of under the hood stuff for this, although the two of them sort of have crossed over a little bit on some things. If you're not familiar with Ozwookie, one thing you probably will be familiar with that he was heavily involved with was the conversion of the FSX Grumman G21 Goose flying boat, updating it and converting it so that you could use it in the new Microsoft Flight Simulator. So clearly, these are two people who know what they're doing, and as this review progresses, you'll see why all that kind of stuff is very impressive. There's a bus driving through the truck behind me. Anyway, those are the two main people behind Big Radials, but what you've also got is you've got Pam Brooker doing the flight modelling. If you know anything about people that make flight models, you'll know that that's one of the well-known names of flight modelling. And then you've got a very experienced pilot in Don Spence doing the flight testing for it. Now, there are some other people involved in it that created the manual and stuff like that, but if you buy this product and you have a look in the PDF, they're all credited in that, and believe me, by the end of this review, you are going to want to buy this product. Is that good? Spoiler alert. Anyway, the manual, whilst we're on the subject of it, 34 pages PDF. It's very good. It'll get you up and running in no time, so that's impressive as well. Now, as far as the actual product is concerned, the download file is 1.3 gigabytes in size. That expands to 3.13 gigabytes when it's all installed and what have you, and it goes in your community folder. And when it does install, the config file is not hidden, so if you like repainting or messing around with stuff, that's good news. For that, you get the P40B with 7 different paint jobs that are representative of most of the users of this variant of the P40. So that would be the Soviet Air Force, that would be the RAAF, the RAF, the American Volunteer Group, aka the Flying Tigers and what have you. So you know, lots and lots of different users. US Army Air Corps, when these things were painted green when they were at Pearl Harbor, where a couple of them actually managed to take off and shoot down some of the attackers and stuff like that. So you get lots of really great paint jobs, but because the config file is not hidden, painters are really going to have at this. So any paint job that you're after for this thing, trust me, it's probably going to be on flightsim.to in a matter of days. Now, you can see that this is experiencing a little bit of the transparency artifacting that some add-on aeroplanes get. That is not the fault of the developer. It's something that shows up on a few add-on aeroplanes, including, which you can see, that appears to have made a belly landing in the background there, including the Flying Iron Spitfire 9. So yeah, if you see flickering on that transparency on the windscreen, not the fault of the developer, something that Asobo need to address, and hopefully they will. Now, I don't think you need to be a rocket scientist to work out that this is a really, really nice model. Looks great, but also really, really impressive texturing. That shows you how nice the modelling is on this thing. Lots of detailing, lots of sort of the odd ripple on the skin where the DSUS fasteners and rivets have pressed in and all that kind of stuff, and the right sheen for the aircraft at the time and stuff like that. Very, very, very nice modelling, and very sympathetic to the thing, not sort of like over the top, but you know, a little bit of wear and tear on it. I really like the modelling on that, and trust me, all the paint jobs are like that. It's very cool. There's a fun one in the paint jobs as well that the developers put in there. I'll leave you to discover that when you buy the thing, if you do. Anyway, when we get inside the thing, boom, like that, the impressive appearance it continues on the inside. This is about as accurate as it could be. Trust me, I am a massive fan of the P40. I'm actually scratch building a radio control one at the minute. So believe me, if there was something wrong on this, I'd have spotted it. because I've got bookshelves groaning under the weight of books on the P40. Now, pretty much everything works in this cockpit. The only thing that doesn't work is the old-style World War II radio. And you probably wouldn't want it to work anyway, because you'd have to crank this thing around to tune it. Now, they've worked a way around that is very clever that we're going to get to in a minute. There are some hidden radios in this cockpit. Well, you see where they are. It's very cool. Anyway, before we get to that, let's have a look at all the stuff that works. Now, so obviously the flap lever works. The landing gear lever works as well. Now, you can use keyboard shortcuts to do that. So you can lower the flaps or increase the flaps with the F7 and the F6 keys, and you can lower the landing gear and raise the landing gear with the G key. However, what you can also do is you can use the correct method to do it. Now, if the engine wasn't running, you would pump up some hydraulic pressure using this lever here. And then what you would do is, if you wanted to lower the flaps, you would move the flap lever to where you wanted position-wise. And then what you would do is you would press this button on top of the joystick, which isn't a gun trigger or anything like that. What that is that's the release valve for the hydraulics that would then operate the flaps whilst the flap lever was in that position. And then after you'd got the flaps in the position you wanted, you'd move the flap lever back to the neutral position, and you would monitor this gauge here to know where the flaps were, because they're split flaps on a P40, so you can't see from the cockpit what position they are, although you would be able to tell from the way it was flying whether the flaps were deployed or not. The same thing is true of the gear lever. You would move the gear lever, then press the trigger, and then watch the gear indicators to make sure that they were in position, and then after you've done that, you move the gear lever back to neutral. So same thing. Now, obviously, you know, clicking and holding things is a bit of a faff, but if you want to do it, you can. So without power, you would use that lever, and with power, what you do is you'd make sure that the engine was running, and then you'd make sure that you had some hydraulic pressure. That's important on the P40 because the P40 doesn't have down locks on the landing gear. It's the hydraulic pressure that holds it in place. So if we were going to tow this without the engine running, what we'd have to do is we'd have to pump that lever to make sure that there was some hydraulic pressure so that the gear didn't retract, or if we were taxiing it when we start the engine, we'd make sure that it had some pressure. So, you know, the fact that you can do that sort of thing is indicative of the attention to detail that they've put on this thing. Now, moving along, what we've got is rudder trim. Now, I've got a genuine P40 manual. It's not for a P40B, it's for a P40E. But what it says in the P40E manual that I've got, it says that you don't actually use any rudder or elevator trim on takeoff. But I found that it helps a little bit with Microsoft Flight Simulator's slightly questionable ground handling. So you'll notice I've dialed in 5 and 5 to pitch the nose up a little bit and give it a little bit of right rudder and what have you, and you might want to try that if you're flying the thing. So propeller RPM forward, mixture lever fully forward. On the real thing, when you start a P40, you start it with the mixture on 100%, and then what you do is you pull it back to auto rich. That's how you do it on the real thing, but to be honest, you can leave it in fully rich if you want to. Obviously what we need to do is, if we're going to start this, which we are at some point, we need to put it on a fuel tank that's got some fuel in, and we probably want the magnetos on as well. There are some switches down here which I will move the view so that you can see them. Some of them you would want to use. That incidentally is your trigger on the front of it, because some people would think that would be the one that would fire the machine guns, but it's not. The trigger on the P40 was on the front of the joystick. Now, these switches here, all of them work, but not all of them do something. By that I mean that'll turn the battery on, that'll turn the generator on, that'll turn the pitot heat on, that will turn the landing lights on and lower them under the port wing. That will turn the tail lights on, wing lights on, fuselage lights on, and so on and so forth. That'll turn the fuel pump on, so you can hear that. That'll put the avionics on, and that'll put the audio horn for if you're coming in for a landing with the gear retracted, and you can turn it off if you're finding that annoying. That says compass on it, but what it actually does is it turns on the panel lights like that, and that one turns on the spotlight, which you can probably see coming on and off. So you can fly this thing at night if you want, because it has got internal illumination. These would be the arming switches and what have you, so they don't actually do anything in the sim, but you can still flick the switches if you want to. Now, because we're a little bit zoomed in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the view back. Now, note that one of the interesting things that you can do with this, which is not true of all Flight Simulator add-ons, is you can do that, which is lean out of the cockpit. Now, some Flight Simulator add-ons, they stop you from moving your view outside of there, but this one won't let you do it, so you can do that kind of leaning out of the window thing, which is kind of cool. I'm glad they've done that, because it's good for screenshots as well. Now, carrying on, looking at stuff that works. This is the gun arming switch, which on the real thing, you can see it has a cable that runs to the breech of one of the machine guns, which the barrels poke out of those things either side of the carburetor air intake part. Obviously this thing is in Microsoft Flight Simulator, so the guns don't actually work on it, so that doesn't really serve much purpose. However, one of the very clever things that they've done is this. On the rear of the breech of the machine gun, if you click on it, ta-da! Transponder, modern avionics for the radio and what have you, which means that because you can put a transponder code in, you can use it on your online VAT sims and all that kind of stuff if you want to. Isn't that clever the way they've hid that in there? Doesn't end there though. Look at this. Boom, on the other side, landing tips, hide the stick and all that kind of stuff. So pretty cool, eh? I think that's really nice, and it's indicative of the things like the fact that you can lower the landing gear in the genuine way, and thoughtful stuff like that, which is hidden and sympathetic with the look of the thing, is one of the reasons why I'm saying, there's lots of things like that going on this, plus beautiful modelling and flight modelling and stuff like that, and you begin to see why I'm saying it is worth 25 quid. Anyway, let's carry on looking at this thing. So, with magneto switches, there's a little switch there that says Prestone or Prestone or what have you, with an on-off thing on it. What that is that relates to this warning light up here. You can see it's got the same word on it there. It says warning on it. What that is if your engine coolant starts overheating, that lights up, and then if you were flying at night, you can turn the light off, so you weren't getting a lot of glare off it. And what you would then, of course, do is you monitor these temperature gauges and get the cowl flaps open like that and throttle back a little bit. And cowl flaps, there they go. You can see them underneath. If we put it on that view there, I'll show you the animation for that. There you go. So, cowl flaps. Cool, eh? So that's what that thing there and that switch there is. That is for the prop pitch. Now you can leave that switch up for it to be automatic, or there's a 2-stage down where you'd move it left and right if you wanted to do that manually. I don't think that actually functions in the sim. It might do at some point, because what the developers have said is as the SDK gets more capabilities, they're going to tweak this thing. So you never know. But at the moment, it's not really doing a lot. Fuel gauge, you can see we've got 50% fuel. The indicator for the flaps and what have you. So like that, you can see I've raised the flaps, and I don't have to use that system if I don't want to. I can use the keyboards to do that. And then the gear indicators there, that's the main gear, that's the tail wheel. We've got amperes there, you've got suction, reading 0 because we haven't got the engine running. You've got a clock on there with a second hand, so you can sort of use it as a chronometer. Airspeed indicator in miles per hour, compass heading there, repeated down here as well if I move the stick out of the way. Altimeter, which obviously I can put to field elevation if I want to. Turn and slip indicator, artificial horizon, vertical speed indicator, radiator temperature. It says coolant, but it's actually the radiator temperature. And below that, carburetor temperature, which is why that's actually reading a slight temperature, because it's reading the ambient air temperature. oil temperature there, oil pressure, fuel pressure, manifold pressure, RPM, and hydraulic pressure. So some of these things aren't going to light up until the engine's running. Carburetor heat if you want to apply it. Engine primer, 3 or 4 on that to get the thing started. That would normally be the radio, but as we've seen, the radios are hidden. That thing is the cowling flap control. That would, on the real thing, be something that you could furiously pump backwards and forwards to get the pressure up if you wanted to. And that is about your lot. There is if we move the view down here, you can see this thing, and you might think, oh, they haven't put this thing in here. Yeah, what that actually was on the real thing was some radio signaling equipment, which doesn't really have any relevance to Microsoft Flight Simulator. So it's not like they've forgotten something there. There wouldn't be really much point in them doing it, in the same way that there's not really much point in there being an arming switch for the guns. But at least they have put it on there, so you can at least you can make daka noises as as you fly up behind your friend. Notice that there are 2 gauges on the floor there for drop tanks and stuff like that as well. So plenty of fuel gauges in there and what have you. And on the subject of fuel, boom, there you go. So Center 1, Center 2, and what have you, like that. Different variants of P40 had different fuel and what have you. So that changed over time, but that's accurate for the P40B. Parking brake there, like that. Now, one thing I am going to do here is I'm going to hit the escape key, and I'm going to go on here, like that, and I'm going to go to the sound, and I'm going to crank the sound up. So, master sound up, like that. Aircraft engines up. And I'm going to hit apply and save. I'm not going to keep it on that because you won't be able to hear me talking when I do that. But for the purposes of starting the engine, because the engine sounds on this are really good. Now, the P40, to start it, it had an inertia starter. If you're not familiar with what an inertia starter is, if you had one of them little friction engine toy cars when you were a kid that you race along the ground, you go rim, 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 and then you pick it up, and the friction engine inside it is making the wheel spin. That's basically what an inertia starter's like. If you ever broke one of those apart, if you were the kind of kid that took things apart, and I think most people did, you'll know that it had a little heavy flywheel in it. That's what an inertia starter is. There is a heavy flywheel on the side of the engine. The battery can spin that up to speed. Then, because it's spinning at high speed, it's got a lot of inertia, a lot of weight behind it, and it had a clutch attached to it, which you could then engage to the crankshaft. That would turn the engine over, and if you had the magnetos on and you had the fuel pumps on, hopefully the engine will spark, and that's how you'd start the engine. And you can do that for real on this thing. You can control it if you want to, but when you can hear sounds like this, you wouldn't want to. So here we go. Down for the inertia starter. And then up to engage the clutch on the inertia starter with the crankshaft. That's a cool engine sound, but wait while you hear it from the outside. And if you think that's good, wait till I rev it up. Nice, eh? Anyway, back in the cockpit. You can hear that the sound is muted a little bit when you close the canopy. Now, I don't want to be shouting over that loud engine noise all the way through the review. So what I am going to do is I'm going to take the sounds down again. But my hat is off to whoever it was who did the sound for that, because I've seen a lot of P40s at places like Duxford and what have you, including the oldest surviving P40B. I saw that starting up and flying. That was one that was actually at Pearl Harbor when it was attacked. It used to be in the UK. I think it's in the United States now. And I've seen that one start up and fly around and what have you. And trust me, that sounds like an Allison V1710 engine. So whoever made the sounds on this, well done, mate. That's all I can say. So we know everything works in the cockpit, and we know it looks good, and we know it sounds good. So what's it fly like? Well, now as I say, I've put some trim on that. The manual that I've got says you don't need it. You can, as far as flaps are concerned, you can, according to the manual that I've got, it says you can have any flap setting you like as long as it isn't more than halfway. So I guess we're going to find out. Yeah. Anyway, let's mow down this guy, shall we? So release the parking brake. Ground handling on this is really, really nice. If you give it a stab of brakes and a bit of rudder, it turns really, really well. And it's just little things like that that they've got really, really well. Don't want to overcook it, but you know, don't want to run out of runway. There we go. Now, not the biggest airfield in the world, but you can actually get off this airfield without any flaps. Believe me, I have actually done it. It was close, but there you go. But what I'm going to do on this occasion is let's go with half flaps. So we can see on the indicator you got half flaps, because of course when you look out on the wing you can't actually see that the flaps have deployed, because the P40 has split flaps. There you go. So it's useful to be able to see that indicator. And what we can see now is we've got some hydraulic pressure and what have you, and we've got some suction and all that kind of stuff. So everything would hopefully be working okay. Let's go for a takeoff. Now what I'm going to do to take off is stick back so that it holds the tail down so we track nice and straight, and half throttle so we don't get a lot of swing, and a bit of right rudder until we know that we're going, and then we'll feed in the rest of the power and what have you, and hopefully that should work. So just have a bit of a look, make sure that that bus wasn't on the runway, and we get back in the cockpit, stick back, bit of power, a bit of right rudder. Let's see if we can get the tail up. You can see that that thing's swinging a lot, even though I'm giving it full right rudder there. Whoa, that was close. I think I probably got some leaves in the undercarriage. So you have to give it a lot of right rudder. You saw that I had right rudder trim on, and that thing was still going to the left, and I had full rudder put in on that thing. So yeah, you got to make sure that this thing is tracking straight, otherwise you can get in trouble. But it's one of those that you can get used to it. Now I'll put the flaps up, and then what I'll do is I'll go on the external view, because I want to show you the gear retraction on this thing, because it's really nicely done. So here we go. Alright, and then I'm going to hit the G key, Get out. Then you might also have noticed that it pitched up when the gear was retracted. So I'm now having to hold in a lot of forward stick to do that. So this thing does experience significant trim change requirements when you change the configuration of it, like when you drop the flaps or raise the flaps or lower the gear and what have you. So it's kind of cool that it does all that sort of thing. Now obviously what I would need to do here is, because we're going to bring this thing in for a landing, is get that rudder trim off, because I needed it for takeoff. But I don't need it for landing. And you know, to be perfectly honest, you saw there that, you know, like, I needed all the rudder trim that I could get to stop that departing off there. I mean, Barton, it has got a lot of trees on it, to be honest. But there you go. It's what makes it fun, isn't it? So anyway, there's the airfield behind us. This, incidentally, is not all of the default scenery for Manchester. If you go to I think it's flightsim.to, there is some scenery for Manchester that adds a bit more realistic scenery. So you've got things like the Trafford Centre and the AJ Bell Stadium and all that kind of stuff, which is what's really there at Barton Aerodrome and what have you. Now this thing has a convincing roll rate, has good sounds when you do things like rolls, you know, sort of clattering about. I mean, you'll know that if you fly aeroplanes for real, about the only thing it doesn't do, which happens on the real things, is that you get all the grit off the cockpit floor going in your mouth. Which certainly would have happened on a P40, because the P40 was fairly unusual in the top of the main wing. The main wing was one piece. It didn't have like a left and right wing. It had like a kind of one-piece wing, a bit like a model aeroplane. And the top of the wing was actually the floor. So what you would be looking at there was actually the top of the wing surface on the P40. That's one of the things that made it really, really strong. Which is kind of cool. So I'll get the flaps and gear down. Hopefully that will be happening. Yep, there we go. Come on. Did you notice that I had to put some revs on to get some pressure to get the gear to come down? Cool stuff, eh? It's got loads of really, really nice touches like that. So that 25 quid's starting to look like a bit of a bargain now, isn't it? Anyway. Now, it's not the easiest thing to land. Not terribly hard, but, you know, hopefully I won't bugger it up. Bounced it a little bit, but not the worst landing I've ever made. It was better than the takeoff, wasn't it? There we go. Anyway, flaps coming up. And and we'll taxi it in. And it would help if I was looking where I was going. So, this thing is really, really nice. Oh, while we're when we're looking like this, if I open the canopy, like that, that's what I'm talking about. You can kind of lean out of the cockpit if you want to. I mean, you don't have to. We can always cheat and go on an external view, but I like the fact that you can do that, you know, rather than them putting a limit on where you can move the camera view. By sort of preventing you moving outside the extremities of the cockpit. I think that's pretty cool. We'll get this thing back where we started from. Ooh, it's a bit fierce on the brakes there. Now, of course, on the real thing, what you would do is you'd be looking at the temperature gauges and what have you, and letting the thing run down a little bit before you shut it off. But you know, for the purposes of this review, I'm not going to worry about that too much. So, get the prop back, and we'll get the mixture back. And there it goes. There we go. So it's kind of nice the way the propeller spins down on it as well. And you'll notice that because of that, what we've got is on the external model, we've got chocks in place now, which is cool. Do I recommend it? Yes. Now, I'll be honest. Big Radials gave me a copy of this. This is the I got this today. This is the same as the release version of it and what have you. And so I didn't actually buy this, but if I'd seen a review of it, I would be playing it immediately, because it really is that good. I mean, the P40 is one of my favourite aeroplanes anyway. I think it's one of the prettiest World War II aeroplanes there is, and it's, you know, it's one of the unsung heroes of World War II. But something like this, I just think they've done such a nice job of it that I thoroughly recommend it. I think it's really, really good. So what are you waiting for? There's a link to where you can get this thing in the description below this video. Anyway, that's it for this this quick look at the Big Radials P40B, otherwise known as the Tomahawk 2 in RAF parlance, or some people would call it the Warhawk. Whatever you want to call it, one thing you can call it is an absolute winner. Look out for Big Radials, because I think that's a development company that's one to watch. If this is the first product that they've managed to get out under the difficult circumstances of the slightly unfinished SDK of Microsoft Flight Simulator, then when everything's going in their favour and they've got some more sort of products and experience under the belt, can you imagine the kind of thing that they're going to be banging out? It's very impressive. Anyway, that's all for now. Enjoy. Bye.